Danielle Brooks had never imagined that one day, a simple call for help could change her entire life. It started like any other day. She had been working long hours as a nurse, helping patients and making sure the most vulnerable were safe. One evening, she received a call to assist an elderly woman named Margaret Klein. Margaret lived alone, and Danielle was there to provide medical help and ensure her well-being. The visit was routine, professional, and uneventful. But the next day, Margaret was found dead, and Danielle's world would turn upside down. The police came knocking, and what began as a routine inquiry quickly escalated into something unimaginable. They questioned her relentlessly. At first, it was casual, asking about her visit, the time she arrived and left, the medications she administered. But slowly, the tone changed. The questions became sharper, more accusatory. They insinuated that she might have had a motive, that perhaps she had taken something from Margaret, and that her story might not be the truth. Danielle protested, explaining that she had only come to help, that she had never harmed anyone in her life. But the detectives were persistent. Detective Mark Reynolds was relentless, stern, and intimidating. Detective Laura Whitman appeared calm, almost sympathetic, but she skillfully manipulated Danielle's emotions. They told her that there were inconsistencies in her statements, that witnesses had said things that contradicted her version, and that unless she cooperated, she might face charges herself. Hours passed. She was not allowed to leave. She had no food, no water, no sleep. Her mind began to cloud, her judgment weakening with every passing hour. And then they offered her a deal. "Sign the confession, and you can go home," they said. At that moment, exhausted and terrified for her child, Danielle made the worst decision of her life. She signed. She confessed to a crime she had not committed. And as soon as the words left her pen, she felt the weight of what she had done, yet there was no turning back. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Danielle realized too late that this moment would define her future. Now, viewers, I want to ask you something before we continue. Where are you watching from? What city or country are you joining us today? Make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a like before we dive deeper, because the story of Danielle Brooks is one you need to hear. As the days went by, Danielle was officially charged. The news spread quickly through the small town. People she had known her entire life looked at her differently. Colleagues avoided her, neighbors whispered behind closed doors, and her child's school began to treat her family with suspicion. Even those who had once trusted her questioned her integrity. Danielle tried to explain that the confession was coerced, that she had only signed out of fear and exhaustion, but the legal system seemed deaf to her pleas. Her lawyer attempted to challenge the confession, but the judge, Robert Hawley, insisted that the written statement was valid and admissible in court. The prosecution built their case around that single confession, despite lacking concrete evidence linking Danielle to Margaret's death. Every day, Danielle sat in court, watching as her life was dissected and judged based on a few words she had been forced to write under unimaginable pressure. She thought about her child, her career, and the life she had worked so hard to build. The weight of the system pressed down on her, relentless and unyielding. She realized that the system was less concerned with the truth than with closure, with expediency, and with appearances. And yet Danielle refused to give up completely. She tried to maintain her composure, to tell the story of what really happened, but every time she spoke, it felt like the walls were closing in. The detectives had succeeded in breaking her down, and the court proceedings seemed to echo the same unrelenting pressure. Danielle was trapped in a nightmare, one from which she could not wake, and she understood that her fate rested not on justice, but on the way others perceived her under extreme circumstances. As Danielle waited for her trial, the days blended into one long, suffocating stretch of fear and uncertainty. Every court date reminded her of the confession she had signed under duress, a confession that the police had manipulated from the start. Yet in her heart, she knew she was innocent. The truth of what had happened that day with Margaret Klein was simple. She had been there to help, nothing more. But in the courtroom, the narrative had already been constructed against her. The prosecution presented her confession as undeniable proof, and witnesses were guided to confirm the version of events the police had shaped. It seemed impossible to convince anyone otherwise. Danielle felt trapped, aware that the system had not only failed her, but had turned against her completely. Then came the turning point. An independent investigator, brought in by her appeals attorney, Angela Morris, began to scrutinize the case files, police reports, and timelines. What they found was shocking. The fingerprints at the scene did not match Danielle. The timeline proved she could not have been present at the critical moments. And most importantly, new evidence revealed that Margaret's grandson, Evan Miller, who had a history of petty theft and had been seen near Margaret's home that night, was the likely culprit. The realization hit Danielle like a wave. Her confession, forced and manipulated, had almost destroyed her life for something she did not do. The appeals process began, slow and grueling, but the tide started to turn. Her legal team presented the new evidence, highlighting the coercion used during her interrogation. Expert testimony confirmed that prolonged questioning, deprivation of sleep, food, and water, as well as threats to her child, had resulted in a false confession. The court could no longer ignore the overwhelming proof that Danielle had been pushed into admitting something she was not guilty of. Finally, after months of waiting and fear, Danielle was exonerated. The judge acknowledged the miscarriage of justice, and her record was cleared. She walked out of the courthouse a free woman, but the victory was bittersweet. The years lost, the public scrutiny, the emotional toll, and the fractured relationships could not be fully repaired. Danielle had survived the worst the system could throw at her, yet she knew that countless others might not be so fortunate. Her story became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how easily fear, manipulation, and systemic failures could twist the path of justice. The moral was clear. Truth could be distorted, and the law, while intended to protect, could sometimes punish the innocent. Danielle's resilience had carried her through, but the scars remained. Her life had been changed forever, and she vowed to advocate for those who might be coerced into a similar nightmare. Danielle's experience was a warning. Never underestimate the weight of a system that prioritizes expediency over human truth. And never forget the personal cost when the vulnerable are forced into impossible situations. And now, viewers, if Danielle's story touched you, if you felt the fear, the injustice, and the courage it took to survive, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button on this video. By supporting this channel, you help share stories like Danielle's with the world, stories that reveal the harsh realities many face and the strength it takes to reclaim justice. Remember, one person's fight for truth can shine a light on the system for many, and your engagement helps keep these stories alive.